Welcome to the New You Game Plan, your blueprint for health and fitness transformation. I'm your host, Kirk Charles. The focus of this show is to uncover strategies to become the best version of yourself. Today's expert guest will help guide us along that journey, Dr. Philippe Douyon, a board-certified neurologist who is going to share information about how the brain works and how it can be reprogrammed for success. Since this is our first time together, before we get to our guest, I'd like to pull back the curtain a bit and share the who and the why behind the New You Game Plan. I've been in the trenches of the fitness world since 2010. As a NASM certified personal trainer, I've conducted over 15,000 training sessions with people striving to be stronger, leaner, and healthier. You might recognize me from my work with Men's Health, the largest men's magazine in the world, where I wrote a weekly exercise column. I was also fortunate to be featured on the cover of 2 Men's Health special issue magazines. You may have also seen me in over 100 national and regional television, streaming, and print commercials related to health, fitness, finance, pharmaceuticals, and many other consumer categories. And lastly, you might have caught the news coverage of my 2024 cycling trip from Central Park in New York City all the way to Lincoln Park in Chicago. It was a 2-week journey to promote the benefits of plant-based living to overcome heart disease. But for me, the New You Game Plan isn't just professional, it's deeply personal. I adopted a plant-based lifestyle in 1989, long before it was a trend or the cool thing to do. But even with decades of experience, life has a way of throwing a knockout punch you never saw coming. Hypertension is the silent killer, a predator that bleeds your energy and destroys your health without symptoms. For years, it was tracking me down, and it caught up to me in 2023. I was locked in the jaws of a hypertensive crisis, with my blood pressure surging past a life-threatening 180 over 120. I was a deer caught in the headlights, waiting for a stroke to run me over. In that condition, the smart move is to rush to the ER for a cocktail of emergency medications to force your blood pressure down. But I was terrified of becoming a prisoner to a pill bottle. I feared that if I started those drugs, I'd be dependent on them for the rest of my life, never truly correcting the underlying problem. In a state of pure desperation, I pulled the trigger on a nuclear option I'd been considering for years, but was never strong enough to do. I decided to fight my hypertension with a 100% raw, whole food, plant-based protocol for 90 days. It was my last resort. That pivot pulled me back from the brink of disaster. It brought my blood pressure under control without drugs, and it stands as the defining moment of my existence. It convinced me that this show had to come to life to provide a blueprint for those locked in the clinches of their own crisis, maybe teetering on the edge of disaster, or for those who simply want that winning edge. The underlying principle of the New You Game Plan is that transformation happens most effectively when your identity, your eating habits, and your actions are in alignment. And they form the 3 pillars upon which this show is based. Identity integrity is the commitment to live in alignment with your best self. It's about creating a structure where your daily habits reflect your highest values, making the best version of you the path of least resistance. 50-50 Fresh is the commitment to live in alignment with your metabolic needs. Plants are your first line of defense against disease and your primary offense to promote metabolic superiority and transform your immune system into a shield of armor. The Daily Activity Dose is the commitment to live in alignment with your biomechanical needs. Movement is treated as a fundamental prescription to prevent deterioration and maintain supreme fitness. And now, to help us bridge the gap between mindset and the new you, we have the man of the hour, Dr. Philippe Douyon. Dr. Douyon is a board-certified neurologist, brain and mindset coach, author, and speaker. He specializes in helping motivated professionals optimize brain function for peak performance. Through his expertise, he provides science-backed strategies to rewire the brain for success, health, and fulfillment. I first met Dr. Douyon one day at a men's conference in 2025. The next morning, I saw him in the gym at 5:30 a.m., putting in the work to fortify his mind and body. He doesn't just talk about health. He is the embodiment of identity integrity, 50-50 Fresh, and the Daily Activity Dose. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Now, tell me, Doctor, what is it that brought you to the point now where you're a neurologist? What happened in your past that made you want to get into this line of work and to help people and to make people be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, so for me, it was growing up as a kid, my maternal grandmother, she was like the backbone of the family. So you see those movies where the entire family gets together for Sunday night dinner. That was us, but we did it on Saturday night. We'd get together at grandma's house, and it was amazing. It was something I looked forward to as a kid every single week. And then she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and all of that went away. And around the same time, I had a younger cousin who was diagnosed with epilepsy, so she was having seizures. And those are two really devastating illnesses for somebody to go through. And they're devastating illnesses for the family to witness. I saw my grandmother just become a shell of who she had been. And while watching both my family members go through this, I thought to myself, man, when the brain works the way that it's supposed to, it's this really powerful organ. And so that was really kind of my first foray into neurology and what got me interested in it.
Question: how should the brain work?
So the brain is incredibly powerful. From our perspective, it is the most complicated thing that we have in our entire solar system. And it is made up of 60 to 100 billion neurons, the primary cell types that we think of in the brain. But then there's trillions of other cells that support the neurons to make sure that they work the way that they're supposed to. And so the way that the brain works is that all these neurons communicate with each other. They form trillions of connections with each other. And they are the backbone, these neurons, these cells, of how we think, how we act, how we move. And so when it's working the way that it's supposed to, we're able to live these really amazing, powerful, fulfilling lives. But what we see so much now today is that we're not taking very good care of our brains, and our brains are starting to deteriorate in ways that impact the way that we go about our life.
Could you define a neuron for me?
Yeah. So a neuron is a cell in the brain. It's what we think of as the primary cell type, the most important cell in the brain. And what makes these neurons so incredibly special compared to other cell types in the brain is that neurons are specifically built to connect with other neurons and communicate with other neurons. So one of the things that I tell people often is every neurological disorder you see, every brain disorder that you see is because there's a breakdown in communication and connection with neurons. So for instance, in somebody that has dementia, they may lose billions of neurons throughout their brain, so they're not able to communicate well with each other. In somebody who's had a stroke, you get a clot that blocks the flow of blood to a particular part of the brain, and that causes neurons in that particular part of the brain to die, and so they can't communicate and connect with each other. And so every neurological disorder, every brain disorder is due to a breakdown in connection and communication. And when we sort of compare that to the way that people act, right? When you see breakdowns in family members, breakdowns with couples, breakdowns between countries that result in war, it's all because of breakdown in communication and connection.
Now, what can accelerate the rate of breakdown and what can decelerate the rate of breakdown of those neurons?
Yeah, so we have the ability to control the way our brain evolves. And so the things that we do every single day impacts whether or not we're making new neurons and new connections, or whether we are potentially killing neurons and connections, right? So obviously, if I said, oh, somebody had a brain injury, right? Somebody got hit in the head with a baseball bat. Everybody could be like, oh, okay, yeah, they would cause some damage that could potentially kill some brain cells, right? But what about the things that we're eating every day? What about the things that we are drinking every day and the way that that impacts the way these neurons are evolving? What about the physical activity or lack thereof, the sedentary lifestyles? That impacts the way that our neurons are evolving. Even how much sleep are we getting? That impacts the way that our neurons are evolving. So we have the ability to control the way our brains evolve, how healthy our brains are throughout our entire lives based on how we think and how we act.
Now, the evolution of the brain, is our brain the same as it was a couple of million years ago, or has it evolved? Is it more sophisticated? Can we do more things, less things?
Yeah, so early humans had smaller brains. And we believe that the reason that we sort of developed these bigger, more complicated brains with a lot more neurons is because early humans had to walk a lot, right? They had to walk for food or run for food. They had to chase down their prey. They had to avoid predators, right? They had to move to different climates. And that caused this process of encephalization where their brains had to get much bigger and needed a lot more cells. And what we see today is even though we have these bigger, more complicated brains, often when we're living sedentary lifestyles, it causes the brain to shrink. And so movement is really key in making sure that our brains are really healthy.
You mentioned the word, I believe it was encephalization.
Mhm.
Can you give me just
Yep.
a quick definition of that?
Yeah, it's just the process in which our brains got bigger over a period of time, got more complicated, developed more cells
Mhm.
throughout our evolutionary history.
Now, I'm assuming that throughout evolutionary history, we had fresher food and people are moving more.
Yep,
And now we seem to be in an environment where people are eating a lot of ultra processed food and we're
yep,
not moving as much.
that's
And
right.
that is actually shrinking the brain.
Absolutely. Right. So people think that exercise is made for your body, right? So that way you could look a certain way, you could put on all these muscles. Well, exercise is really made for the brain. Exercise is the biggest promoter of neuroplasticity. That is your brain's ability to make new neurons and new connections. That's your brain's ability to heal, to adapt, and to learn, right? If you're not exercising, you can't do any of those things. And in fact, like I said, people who live sedentary lifestyles, we see that their brains get smaller, but people who live sedentary lifestyles are at high risk of developing dementia. And when it comes to the way that we eat, I think we've all forgotten what the real purpose of food is, or maybe we haven't learned what the real purpose of food is. Food is there in order to give us the energy to go throughout our day. Food is there to help us to heal, right? Food is there to help us to prevent illness. But the way that we eat today, ultra processed foods, constantly eating. We've been fed this idea that we need to eat 3 meals a day, that's not the way that the brain and body were designed. That stuff, the way that we eat, is making us really sick today.
Is there any type of diet that you think is the best, or what are the inferior type diets?
Yeah. For me, I think you want to stay as natural as possible, right? So you mentioned that we eat a lot of ultra processed foods, which is really hard for the body to break down. And so when we're eating these ultra processed foods and now your body has to try to break it down, it causes cells in our gut to tear apart trying to break these things down. Our body's a machine, and the more you overwork it, the more likely it is that it's going to break down. And when these cells are tearing themselves apart to try to break down this food, what ends up happening is that you cause a lot of inflammation. And that inflammation doesn't just stay in your gut. That inflammation travels everywhere in your body, including in your brain. And so I remember I was taking care of this patient. She was in her 30s. Let's say her name was Jessica. And Jessica had epilepsy her entire life. Horrible seizures from the time that she was a kid. By the time she saw me, she was on 7 different anti-seizure medications and had had 2 brain surgeries to try to cure her seizures, but she kept on seizing. I got Jessica to a place where she was seizure free for 6 months, no seizures for 6 months. And you know the way that I did it? All I did was take soda out of her diet. That's all I did. No other big change, right? And then all of a sudden she ended up back in the ER with a seizure. And so I'm like, Jessica, what's going on? And she says to me, you will never take soda out of my diet again. And she had two 1 liter bottles of Pepsi at her bedside, right? And maybe she wasn't ready to make the change, that got her to a place that she was seizure free, or maybe she just wasn't ready to be seizure free because there are sometimes benefits to having a chronic illness. But I really think it illustrates the point that a lot of times it's we don't need to make big changes. One small change can get our bodies and our brains as healthy as we want them to be.
Are you, in this particular case, are you identifying that the sugar in the soda was a problem, or maybe some other chemical in the soda?
Yeah, it was probably a combination of the amount of sugar and the caffeine. So, 2 things that we see that can potentially cause seizures in anybody. And in fact, oftentimes people who have really bad epilepsy, especially kids who have really bad epilepsy, we will overhaul their diet and essentially put them on a ketogenic diet where we're completely for the most part, cutting out the carbs from their diet. So that way their body's not breaking down those carbohydrates into simple sugars, right? And one of the other things that we see, caffeine, those caffeinated drinks, those energy drinks can cause seizures in anybody, even in people who don't have a history of epilepsy. So the things that we put into our body are incredibly important when it comes to our overall health, but especially our brain health.
Regarding the gut-brain connection and inflammation,
Yeah.
what's the best type of food that your gut bacteria needs?
Oh, it's going to be fruits and vegetables. Right? Fruits,
Why is that?
it's much easier for your body to break down, right? Um, Basically, it can kind of go through you. Your intestines will absorb all the nutrients and get rid of whatever else it doesn't need. It minimizes the risk of inflammation in the gut, and it helps to maintain this really healthy balance between what we consider good bacteria and bad bacteria. The reality is that we are much more bacteria than we are human, right? We are much more bacteria and viruses than we are human. We've got probably trillions of bacteria and viruses all over our skin and inside our intestines. And you want to maintain that balance. And when you're eating poorly, when you're causing essentially leaky gut syndrome by causing all these cells to tear apart and they're leaking their contents and they're causing inflammation throughout, well, now you've tipped the balance over. So instead of this good bacteria, you have a lot more bad bacteria that can cause a bunch of problems.
Regarding leaky gut, I've heard
Mhm.
this term a million times. What is
Yeah.
it that actually leaks into the gut that's so dangerous?
Yeah. So when you sit here and you are essentially your gut, your intestines are trying to break down this food that's ultra processed, and as a result, cells are being torn apart. It's the cell content now that is leaking out. And so your body is trying to repair itself, and your body activates an immune response, which short term is a good thing. But long term, the immune response is not good because the immune response is essentially an inflammatory response, right? It's like if you got bit by a mosquito, you get an inflammatory response. Your skin gets bumpy and red, right? And that's your body trying to fight whatever that mosquito sort of deposited. Uh, and then it goes away after a few days. But if the inflammation is there for an extended period of time, it starts to break down even healthy cells. And then that causes even bigger problems. That inflammatory response, the content of those cells, sometimes, food that's not digested well or food waste, that stuff can seep into your bloodstream and travel all throughout your brain and body and cause autoimmune reactions.
What are some of the common autoimmune reactions that can be caused by it?
So you can see people developing arthritis. You can see people developing lupus. From a neurological perspective, you can see people developing encephalitis, which just means inflammation of the brain. That can cause people to have brain fog. That can cause people to have seizures. That can cause a whole host of issues for people, both short term and long term.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you here on the show is because I joke a lot with all of my friends and even doctors that I don't like doctors. I just don't like
Yeah.
them because
Yeah.
most of them are not in shape. But when I met you, at one point we were in the gym at like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this is my type of guy. So I need to really
Yeah.
talk to him. So regarding exercise, what type of exercise do you feel is best, or what amount of exercise do you feel is optimal for brain functioning and overall success?
So I think people need to find a way to exercise every single day, right? Our bodies are made to run, jump, move, dance, do all these things. And at the helm of that, controlling that is our brains. But it's not just that our brains are controlling our movements. Our brains are actually receiving information back from our limbs, our arms, our legs, our bodies as to what's going on. And so it's this beautiful communication, this beautiful connection to keep the whole being really healthy. And at this point, I mean, I think aerobic exercise is great. I think resistance training is really, really important. You need to have a certain amount of muscle on you. At this point, I tell people, look, if you are somebody who loves to dance, find a way to dance 3 or 4 times a week. If you are somebody who has a sport that you love to play, find a way to do that 3 or 4 times a week. get your body moving. That's incredibly important. Ideally, you want to do it every day. Ideally, it needs to be a combination of things. Like for me, yeah, I go to the gym. Like you mentioned, I was at the gym this morning. I had two workouts yesterday, one in the morning, one in the evening. And I play tennis. I recently got into pickleball. I play basketball with my sons. So I do all these things that helps to keep me in shape. And I encourage people to do the same.
Mhm. As far as exercise is concerned, eating is concerned, I like to instill in my clients like a routine, something they do just automatically without thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
what is your best idea or best advice regarding when you should exercise, maybe time of day? How much should you eat in the morning? Should you exercise in the morning or at night? What's the optimal?
So I tell people exercise first thing in the morning. For me, that's incredibly important. I think no matter what happens the rest of the day, you already feel accomplished, you already feel successful. It also, sets you up for a really great day. I think it's really hard to exercise at the end of the day, especially if you've been working all day. And then now you start thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I need to try to exercise. And it becomes this stressful thing. And it's a lot easier to miss. I think it's really important to just start your day off by getting your body moving. When it comes to eating, I'm not somebody who believes that you need to eat 3 meals a day. The people that I've seen the healthiest through my life, the people that I've seen live the longest in life are the people who don't eat as much. And so I think at this point for me, I'll eat one big meal per day. I'll have some fruits and some vegetables maybe throughout the day, but I eat one big meal and it tends to be um, in the evening.
Now, most of us in this country, and I'll even include myself, we eat to exhaustion. We eat to the point where
Yeah.
we just can't stuff anything else into the belly. What do you feel is the optimal amount, or should you just be a little hungry after you eat? Should you be satiated? What's best?
No, I think you need to eat until you're about 60 to 70% full. I don't think you're supposed to eat until you are full, and you certainly shouldn't overeat. I think you want to eat until you're about 60 to 70% full. That's going to decrease the amount of inflammation that you have in your body. There are a ton of neurological disorders that are treated ideally with controlling how somebody eats. And in fact, decreasing your calorie intake is associated with increased neuroplasticity. So the less you eat, the more that your brain is going to make new brain cells and new connections amongst those brain cells. So you should not eat to the point that you're full. You certainly should not overeat. You want to eat enough that gives you the energy that you need throughout the day and that keeps your brain and body as healthy as possible.
Do you recommend intermittent fasting?
Absolutely. Fasting, if people fasted, you'd be a lot healthier, right? Because your body's a machine and you need to give it a break. Can you imagine having a car that you just let run 24/7 every single day? Right? We give our cars breaks, right? Like we park them, we turn them off. You need to do the same thing with your body. You need to either set up a fasting schedule for the day. So like I said, I'll eat one big meal a day. Maybe that meal will be at like 7 o'clock. I may not eat again until noon, right? I certainly will be drinking fluids, but I may not have anything else until noon. And that might be like some fruit that I'll have. And, so you can create a schedule where you've got fasting built in to a 24-hour period, or you could say, look, I'm not going to eat on Sundays. Sundays is my fasting day. Now, you do need to make sure that you're getting plenty of fluids in, but you can build in a fasting day for the week. You can build in fasting days for the month. You could say, look, for the next 72 hours, I'm fasting. Your body and your brain will thank you for it. You'll be that much healthier for it.
For those worried about how much they eat, I know that there's a big issue that people are having now with sugar. We're all talking about there's too much sugar in our lives. And regarding that, I believe the recommendation was maybe 6 teaspoons a day for women, maybe 9 for men. I don't know if that recommendation is still a part of our daily lives or philosophy. But that said, is there too much fruit that you can eat regarding the sugar?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to be careful. The difference between sort of processed sugar and sugar from fruit is that it doesn't give you, when you're eating sugar from fruit, you don't get the same big spikes in your blood sugar that you get with some of the other processed sugars, which is really important. The fact that you don't get these big spikes means that your body now is not releasing a ton of insulin during those moments. Insulin is the body's biggest growth factor, meaning that insulin is going to make you fat. And not only is insulin going to make you fat, insulin is pro-inflammatory, which means that it's going to cause your body to be inflamed. And so when you're getting these big sugar spikes, then your body releases a ton of insulin, which makes you fatter and makes you more inflamed. As opposed to if you're eating more natural fruit where you don't get these spikes and it's kind of like slowly goes up and then kind of stabilizes and slowly goes down, well then, you don't get as much insulin that is being pumped out. And so sugar from fruits is much healthier than sugar from processed or processed sugar, but you still want to be careful.
As you can see, Dr. Douyon has a full grasp on what it takes to transform into the new you. Insight followed by action. If you want the full conversation with Dr. Douyon, it's available right now at kirkcharles.com/newgameplan and youtube.com/@kirkcharles. Before we wrap up the show, I have an exercise to share with you that you can use for your daily activity dose. A great exercise to add to your daily activity dose is the wall sit. Simply place your back against the wall, bring your feet 2 or 3 feet forward, and slide down until your knees are at a 90-degree angle and your hips are at a 90-degree angle. If this position is too difficult, you can slide down, but don't slide down as much. And gradually, over the course of time, work your way down into the 90-degree position. If you do this consistently, you'll feel a surge going through your quads. Also, to add a little more spice to it, you can pop out and do some push-ups to make it more of a total body workout, like this. Plank position for push-ups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Walk the hands back. And have a seat. There it is. Give this a shot. You'll feel the power surging through your quads like never before. Make it happen. Identity, eating, and exercise. Lock them in, and everything changes. If you're serious about becoming your best self, stay connected. Subscribe, share, and bring someone with you. This is the New You Game Plan. I'm Kirk Charles. I'll see you next week.